There's a lot of speculation about the San Diego Padres potentially trading one of their top two starters in Dylan Cease or Michael King. On today's podcast, we'll talk about the likelihood of the Atlanta Braves being the team to do that. What does that look like for them going forward? We'll discuss that and more on today's episode of the Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, and leave me a comment down below. Shout out to Chris Fuller, who leaves a comment every day just to help out the algorithms. I appreciate him and so many more of you that continually do that to help us here at Locked On Braves. If you're listening on the audio version, you can help out by leaving a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. On today's episode of Locked On Braves, we're going to look at the likelihood of the Braves trading for Dylan Cease or Michael King for the San Diego Padres. What would that look like? What are some of the risks that the Braves will be taking in either one of those deals? We'll get into all of that. And also this idea that the Braves are quote unquote punting on the season. I don't think that's the correct term for it, but trying to save money to stay under the tax. And if they are going to do that, it means they better spend big next offseason. We'll discuss that as well and get into some of the news of the day. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app today or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Been a lot of talk, a lot of rumors over the past week or so about the San Diego Padres potentially looking to move Dylan Cease, but now it's also been reported that they could potentially move Michael King. Both those pitchers, obviously top of the rotation type of guys, top of the rotation type of stuff, who are going to be free agents at the end of the year. Let's talk about Cease first. I feel like we've been talking about the Braves trading for Dylan Cease for 3 years now. Dylan Cease has become that workhorse guy that Alex Anthopoulos likes to target. We've seen 4 straight years now of 165 or more innings. And that's why we thought he was so gung-ho to go after a guy like Aaron Nola, just because of the workhorse that he has become. And Dylan Cease has been that now. He's also from Georgia. Now, the downsides for Dylan Cease, he has struggled with walks at times, but he doesn't give up a lot of hits, and he strikes out a lot of batters. He only has 1 year of control left at $13.75 million. So again, this is a rental player. Now he will play all year at age 29. He is good and would be a great addition to the starting rotation. I think that is the understatement of the podcast so far. But here are some other downsides when you consider trading for Dylan Cease. In order to get somebody the caliber of a Dylan Cease who's coming off a really good year, you're going to have to give up one of your top 3 prospects in A.J. Smith-Shawver, Hurston Waldrop, or Drake Baldwin. I cannot imagine a deal between the Padres and the Braves where one of those guys is not involved in a trade for Dylan Cease, and honestly, probably Michael King as well. Maybe not. If you can get away, and we'll talk about this here a little bit more in a minute, if you can get away with getting Michael King and not giving up one of those 3, that needs to be a done deal now, in my opinion. Now, looking at what the Padres would want, I immediately thought that they would want Drake Baldwin because they do have a need at catcher, but they do have one of the top catching prospects in baseball, Nathan Salas, although I think he's probably at least 2 or 3 years away. But at the same time, like I've said with the Braves, I don't think they're going to just suddenly call up Drake Baldwin and hand the rookie the reins behind the plate. No team ready to contend right now is going to do that. So I doubt that the Padres would do that either. They probably would want one of the top pitchers in Smith-Shawver, Waldrop, maybe Caminiti as well. But the cost is likely going to be one of them and then a mid-level prospect as well. So maybe an A.J. Smith-Shawver and Nacho Alvarez or Drew Hackenberg or Lucas Braun, Garrett Ballman, something like that. It's probably going to cost you 2 of those guys to get a Dylan Cease type of player, even on a rental. Here's the other downside of potentially trading for Dylan Cease. He's a Boras client, so an extension isn't likely with him. Now, not crazy. The Braves did just make a deal with Jerickson Profar, who's a Boras client, so maybe relationships are good there. Being a hometown guy from Georgia, maybe he's more likely and willing to sign an extension upon getting traded to the Atlanta Braves, but it's just not something that Boras clients typically do. So that makes it a little less likely, I think, for the Braves to trade for Dylan Cease, because if you are going to give up an AJ Smith-Shawver or a Hurston Waldrop or a Cam Caminiti for 1 year of Dylan Cease, that could turn out really, really bad. Obviously, every pitcher is injury prone, but let's say you give up one of those guys and then Dylan Cease gets injured. So then do you not only not get Dylan Cease for the 1 year you traded for, but you've also traded an asset that could have been a big piece of your rotation in the years to come. So you have to keep that in mind. I just don't think there's any way that Alex would do a deal for Dylan Cease, give up one of those prospects if he wasn't going to be able to sign him to an extension. And again, being a Boras client, you're not going to get that team-friendly deal. And if I'm Dylan Cease and I'm Scott Boras and I'm looking at the market that we just saw where Corbin Burns got $35 million annually, Blake Snell got $36.4 million annually, Fried got $218 million total. If Dylan Cease has another year like he had last year, he's going to get similar type of money going into his age 30 season. And the Braves, they're going to give him a low ball offer of 6 years, 140, 150 million, something like that. So unless he just really wants to play for the Braves and ignores his agent's advice, because his agent's not going to want him to do that, an extension seems very unlikely. And if that's the case, I don't know that I can justify giving up an AJ Smith-Shawver or a Hurston Waldrop or a Cam Caminiti, who could be big parts of your rotation down the road, for 1 year of Dylan Cease. It'd be hard for me to justify. And we already know from my conversation with Grant McCauley how highly they think of Drake Baldwin. So even if they did want Baldwin in this deal, if you weren't willing to include Drake Baldwin in a package for Garrett Crochet, who had 2 years of control left, I can't imagine that they would include him in a deal for 1 year of Dylan Cease. So I think a Dylan Cease trade is very unlikely unless you have an extension in place. I'd be very surprised if they were to be the ones to trade for Dylan Cease and an extension wasn't already pretty much agreed upon. It can't be the situation like the Cubs are in now, where you give up a lot for Kyle Tucker and you almost go to arbitration with them and you still don't have an extension done. If they don't get an extension done with Kyle Tucker, that's going to be an awful deal for them. Same thing with the Braves. If they were having to give up one of those players that I mentioned and not get an extension done, be a terrible look for the Braves. Now, on the other side of this, Michael King, not as long of a track record as a starter, but he was amazing last year, especially after the month of April. He was a little slow out of the gate, but from the month of May on, he was one of the best pitchers in baseball last year. However, it was only the second time he's thrown more than 100 innings, and it was by far the most innings he's ever thrown in a major league season. So that is obviously a bit concerning. He doesn't have that record of being a workhorse, that track record of being a workhorse. And then, as Braves fans unfortunately are well aware of, the performance that he had in the wild card series against the Braves, this is not hyperbole here. That is one of the best postseason performances I have seen. I mean, that sinker, he was just dotting it inside, outside. I know the Braves offense last year was pretty awful, but I don't care if the 23 Braves were up there that night. Michael King was just different that evening, and there was no touching him at all. That was game one of that series, and we talked about Chris Sale not being available and ready for game one. He was going to have to pitch a shutout because Michael King was that good. And so that is lasting for me because it's the last real memory that I have of Michael King pitching, and he looked amazing. So certainly would love to have him, but there's not a huge track record of him as a starter. You want to look at that on the positive lens. That means he doesn't have a lot of innings on his arm either. But I think he is a really good starting pitcher. He's 29 as well, turns 30 in May, so he's about 7 months older than Dylan Cease. He's also a free agent after the upcoming season. He and the Padres couldn't agree in a salary arbitration, so they could be going to a court ruling. He filed for $8.8 million. The Padres $7.3525 million. So either way, it's going to be a good bit cheaper than what we already know Dylan Cease is getting at $13.75 million. I'm not sure who Michael King's agent is, but I'm assuming that means it's not Boras, or that probably would be common knowledge. So Is an extension more likely with him? In my mind, let's say the Braves are in these discussions and they want to go get one of these guys. To me, King feels like the more likely target. You might get by without giving up one of your top prospects for him. He's going to be cheaper money-wise because we know no matter what happens in arbitration, it's going to be a good bit less than what Dylan Cease is getting. And that would make it so I don't think an extension would be necessary. Let's say you even traded in Owen Murphy, who I like and talked about. He was ranked 6th in our prospect rankings we did yesterday. But trading in Owen Murphy for 1 year of Michael King, I could swallow a little bit more. But either way, I'd still, whoever you go out and get in this trade, I wouldn't mind an extension getting done. I like both of these guys. I'd be happy with either one of them. I think King, just cost-wise, both monetarily, what he is projected to get this year, and I think you could get him for a little bit less prospect-wise, might make more sense unless you can get an extension done with Dylan Cease. Then I think you obviously go with him. But again, both of these pitchers are really good. Hopefully the Braves can get one of them. It's seeming like one of them is going to get dealt by the beginning of the season. I don't know what the Padres are doing over there, their situation with their owner dying. It's an unfortunate situation they have going on. A team that was on the rise. It feels like they're taking a step back going into this season. Maybe the Braves could benefit a little bit from that if they're able to get one of these guys. They already signed Jerickson Profar, who, by the way, when the Braves signed him, I had some Padres friends reaching out to me, upset about that they wanted Profar back. Maybe they also go out and get Ha-Sung Kim as well. Just take all the old Padres players. Look, I thought they were the best team in baseball at the end of last year. They kind of blew it against the Dodgers, but it was a really good team last year. So, hey, let's just take the mold, the guys that they had, and see if we can do it in 2025. But let me know what you think. Who would you rather go after? Do you think one is better than the other? Who do you think is more affordable? Do you think the Braves get either one of them? Let me know in the comment section below. Next, I want to turn our attention to comments made from David O'Brien of The Athletic last week. This is before the Profar signing, about the Braves potentially getting under the tax next year, or getting under the tax this year in hopes of spending some money next year. Some of the reasons why they may want to do that. We'll discuss all that in greater detail here and next. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting. All game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. You check it out. The Braves have the third best odds to win the World Series over there right now, behind the Dodgers and the Yankees. And currently, you look at NL MVPs, Ronald Acuna Jr. has the sixth best odds out there. Don't sleep on Spencer Strider. A lot of people thinking he's going to miss a good chunk of the season. He may get slow played a little bit, and they're certainly going to be safe with him, but I don't think he's going to miss that much time. So that might be one to look at over there as well at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure to visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Bet with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. Solely over there, getting you caught up with everything happening around Major League Baseball. All right, let's jump back into our discussion here. This is a little bit outdated, but David O'Brien of The Athletic, he sent off a series of posts on X last week, just kind of his thoughts. These are really just his opinion. Again, this was before the Profar deal. But David O'Brien added some fuel to the fire that the Braves might use this year to get under the tax and kind of evaluate where Acuna and Strider are. He says it seems obvious that they are trying to stay under the tax. And again, this was before the Profar signing, which the Profar signing doesn't change anything. They still are under the tax and still might be trying to do that. And to be clear, DOB is not reporting this is what they are doing and is just like us, seeing what's happening, this offseason, kind of reading between the lines on how this offseason has unfolded. The idea to me of waiting until Acuna and Strider are 100% doesn't sit well with me. And again, this is pure speculation. Nothing confirmed that this is why the Braves would potentially be doing this. Because then you're telling the rest of the talented, very talented players on this team that they don't think that you can win without them, without Acuna and Strider, which just isn't true. The team played most of last year without Acuna and Strider, still won 89 games, got to the postseason, and that was even with all the other injuries that they had. So this team, and as I said all of last year, not many teams could lose Acuna and Strider and still win to the degree that the Braves did. Not many teams, if any team, could lose the number of players for the length of time the Braves did last year and still win 89 games and get to the postseason. But just because you don't know what you're going to get out of Acuna and Strider, that doesn't mean you can't still win a World Series next year. That doesn't mean you still shouldn't be trying to fill the best roster that you possibly can. Look, at the very least, if Acuna is 2022 version of Acuna and everybody else does their job, it's still a very good team. And let's say Strider has to dial it back a little bit. I still just believe in Strider that he's going to be a good pitcher. Maybe he's not Cy Young. Maybe he's more of a 3.75 type of guy. And maybe he's more of a 10 K per nine instead of 11, 12, 13 or where he's been in the past. But I still think he's going to be a very good pitcher. David O'Brien also thinks that just doing enough to keep the Braves in the NL East race will be enough to keep Truist and the battery full all summer and maintain cash flow. I need to keep reemphasizing this. These are just his thoughts and speculation of how he is reading things and what the team might be doing. I don't agree with this. I said earlier in the offseason that I'm curious how fans approach this upcoming season after 3 straight disappointing finishes in the postseason and then the unwillingness by the front office to go all in. Again, this was all before the Profar signing, but I don't think that changes it in the minds of a lot of people. Now, there was a lot more optimism after the Profar signing, but the next question I got immediately is, okay, what do you do for the pitching staff? We saw attendance dip ever so slightly last year. They were still over 3 million, but it was less than the 2 years prior. I can't imagine too many fans are going to be thrilled if they don't do even anything else this offseason. In fact, I know they won't. I've had plenty of people already tell me that they're not going to go to games this season, and they're not going to give the Braves any of their money until they actually spend some more money. And I'm not one of those people that think the Braves don't spend. There's still going to be at least a top 10 payroll. But I've had plenty of fans tell me that they're not going to give the Braves any of their money. So that is a real thing. And then if the Braves were to get off to a bad start, which they're known to do from time to time, even on the best teams that they've had, I don't think summer attendance would drop off catastrophically, but I think it would drop off. I mean, I could see them going back to 2.75 million this year, and that's a big deal. So I don't agree with the notion that if the Braves just do enough to stay in the NL East race, that it's going to drive fans to the stadium. Now, look, Acuna comes back, and he's Acuna. Strider comes back, and he's Strider. That is certainly going to help, and fans will go to the ballpark for that. But I think there's a good bit of the fan base that is going to be a little upset if the Braves don't do more, and if they do hold back a little bit. I think you could see a drop. And like I said, especially if the team gets off to a bad start, I think you could see a drop in fan interest this year for a team that's been to the postseason 7 years in a row. They faded in the postseason, or not even faded. They've just been dismantled in the postseason the last 3 years. And now you've had an offseason where you really didn't do much. There's going to be a lot of upset fans going into this year. If they were to quote unquote punt 2025, which they're not punting 2025, even if they did nothing, this is still going to be a good team that's going to compete for a postseason spot, compete for a World Series. I believe that. I've said it all offseason long. But even if they aren't wanting to spend this offseason to get under the tax, that to me is doing a disservice to this current group in the window. You don't know what 2026, 2027, 2028 looks like, you have a group right now that can win a World Series. And so for you to not do the best you can in building the best roster possible, I think is a disservice to this group. I think it's a disservice to the fans to not go out and put the best roster on the field. And again, we don't know what Alex is looking at, the moves that he's contemplated, but I would hate to see that be the case in my mind. If they were wanting to get under the tax just because they don't want to pay the tax, which, by the way, and I pointed this out several times, Austin outlined a great article over on Battery Power. If you haven't given that a read, go out and do so. But he broke it all down, and it really amounts to not much savings to get under the tax this year. But if that is their plan, they better go absolutely insane next offseason, whether in free agency, trades, whatever the case may be. They better go absolutely insane. But here's the thing. Who's available next offseason, free agency-wise? Vlad Jr., I can't see them being interested in him. Bo Bichette is the obvious name. And look, I like Bo Bichette. I think he's a good bounce-back candidate, but are you really trying to save money to go out and sign Bo Bichette next offseason? Maybe. I kind of doubt that's the guy that you reset the tax for. And again, I'm very much in on a Bo Bichette bounce-back season. I would be happy if the Braves traded for him. Other names are Willie Castro, Tyler O'Neill. He has an opt-out. Luis Robert has a club option, so those guys could potentially be available. Ozuna, maybe they want to get under the tax to save some money to re-sign Ozuna. Shane Bieber, Walker Buehler, Dylan Cease. Obviously, we talked about him. Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly, Michael King, Jordan Montgomery. We talked about Cease and King already. I think those would be the two best names available next offseason. So if they are wanting to stay under the tax this year, they better, in my mind, go crazy next offseason and spend money, get back to right up against that third tax, just like they were, that third threshold in the tax, just like they were last year. I just don't see that really happening because we've never really seen the Braves spend a lot in free agency. So for me, I don't buy into this staying under the tax this year. Look, if moves don't materialize, I get it. But if you're just staying under the tax because you want to save a little bit of money and there are deals on the table that you could make to improve this roster and give them the best chance possible to win a World Series, and you're not making those because you want to stay under the tax, that hurts. That would be a huge disservice to this group that you've built together, that you did such a great job locking up and building together. It'd be a disservice to the fan base who has obviously been super loyal to you and giving you those 3 million fans the last 3 seasons. It would be a huge disservice if they were to do that. So I hope they continue to spend. I hope they go out and feel a need at starting pitcher. I hope they go out and feel a need at relief pitcher. I hope they continue to build out some of the depth for this team, because if they're staying under the tax just to stay under the tax to save money, when there are moves on the table that could be made to help this team, and again, we might never really know that, but that is going to be a real bummer. I don't know what another word to really say there. It's going to be a real bummer for us as fans if that is the case. And I just don't buy into it. I don't buy that it's very beneficial in the long run. I don't think you're going to be able to keep fans engaged the same, like I said, especially if they get off to a slow start. And I don't think it's wise to just sit back and see what happens with Acuna and Strider either. If anything, you should be building more depth and insurance in case those guys aren't who we hope they'll be in 2025. So again, offseason's not over, and this all discussion kind of started before the Profar move, but I do need to see more. And again, if they stay under the tax and there's moves to be made that could have been made, but they didn't because they wanted to stay under the tax, that's going to be pretty upsetting. There were some moves that were actually made, not by the Braves, but other teams. We'll discuss those deals here next. Let's get into some of the news around Major League Baseball. The Reds signed Austin Hayes to a 1-year, $5 million deal. Platoon of that there for the Reds. It's a name that we've talked about, similar deals. Like I still like a guy like Randall Grichuk. If the Braves could get him on that type of deal, he might get a little bit more than that coming off a good year with the Diamondbacks, but he's a bat that I would like. Even just bringing back a Ramon Laureano for 1 year, $4 million, $3 million, something like that. Those are the kind of moves I'm talking about. You don't have to go out and get Jack Flaherty and Alex Bregman. You don't have to do that, but go spend some money to build out the depth on this roster. In case Acuna isn't Acuna, or you need more time on the injured list, go out and build some of that quality depth. And maybe they feel like they've done that with a guy in Brian De La Cruz, but I want more than that. Give me some more proven guys. Adam Frazier signed with the Pirates for 1 year, $1.525 million. Whit Merrifield's probably going to want more than that if he's going to come back and play again. But Whit Merrifield's an example of another guy. Go out and get that guy to replace Luke Williams on your bench, to give you a versatile guy, good clubhouse guy. The Braves need that. They've let so many good leaders walk away this offseason. And I'm not saying that those guys needed to come back, because I feel like they're better at those positions, but they do need some of that veteran presence. And Whit Merrifield brought that last year. He's another guy that I'd go out and give 1 year, $6-7 million to, whatever the case may be, whatever he needs to come back, to be on your bench, to be that guy that can fill in at multiple positions, but also bring that veteran leadership that seems to be lacking. And then this is some interesting news. The Texas Rangers created their own sports network. This is going to allow them to negotiate contracts with different cable and streaming providers to handle in-market broadcasting. And this is an avenue that they're looking at to try to make sure they get their games on as many screens as possible in market. And I'm curious to see if this is the way that other teams start to go about it whenever their contracts are up with FanDuel Sports Network or wherever all the other teams are currently contracted. A team like the Braves, I mean, imagine them starting a Braves network, like sports network like that, and being able to control where your games will be played. So really interested. I know a lot of fans are as well, and what this might look like going forward if this is the way that a lot of teams decide to go. Also, we got to briefly mention the Junior Caminero home run trot. I'm sure by now you have seen that. Baseball over there is in Latin America is very fun. It's very entertaining. You love that kind of stuff. I thought it was a little over the top. I'll probably get grilled for that, because you kind of have to be accepting of it these days. But look, it was fun. It was a cool moment. Certainly, it wasn't the end of the game, but certainly the crowd was into it. The players were into it. It was a really fun moment. I thought it was a little over top, personally. But obviously, I think I haven't heard any player talk about more this offseason than Junior Caminero, and the Rays will probably, platoon him and let him only play 4 or 5 days a week, because that's the way they do things. But I thought that was pretty interesting. I wanted to hear some of your thoughts on that. And then the Marlins claimed Connor Gillespie. That's who the Braves had to let go to sign Jerickson Profar. So he gets picked up by another team, unfortunately, there. Try to get some of the questions here for those in the chat. Michael Lawrence says, Jake, got the cap and tax issue, but why not restructuring existing contracts and then go build a strong roster for this year? Can't just say next year injuries and performance aren't given. And I agree with that. And they did that to a degree. They restructured the contracts of Ronaldo Lopez and Aaron Bummer, I think. I believe I have those right. But they did restructure those contracts to take down the money for this year, but it really didn't change the AAV, which goes against the luxury tax. But they have restructured some contracts to try to lower the payroll money for this year. Benjamin Lee, maybe they are thinking about an Acuna extension in 2026, and that will raise the luxury tax number. Doubt it. You got 4 more years of control over Ronald Acuna Jr. You got to see what he looks like on those knees first. Unless you're betting on him that he's going to get back to himself, and you want to try to go ahead and extend him now when the value seems somewhat low. I don't see that happening. I don't see Acuna doing that. If I'm Acuna, I'm betting on myself that I'm going to get back to the MVP level that I was, and I'm going to go to free agency, and I'm going to get this big bag that Juan Soto and others are getting. He's not going to get that type of bag because he'll be in his 30s at that point. But I think Acuna is going to be ready to go to free agency to try to get that big bag. Benjamin Lee also asked, maybe that's what A is waiting for certain players to figure out the ARB numbers first. I doubt that's the case. if you are going to trade for somebody who's arbitration eligible, you typically want to do that yourself. But it'd be a hard fight for the Braves who don't have any history with Michael King. You certainly wouldn't want to trade for somebody and then go to an arbitration hearing with them. So with that in mind, maybe you do want the other team to do that first. But I also think if the Braves were to trade for either Cease or King, Alex will be working on an extension to take care of that arbitration year. Austin Pruitt, do you like a Ryan Stanek as a fan? I don't know what you mean as a fan. I don't know him personally. We talked about Stanek yesterday, and I think he would be a good deal for the Braves. Depending on the cost, I think he could be a really good setup man once again. Way the Mercy says you can't restructure deals to get around the luxury tax. Yeah, like I said, it didn't change anything about the luxury tax. It just changed. They made those deals to change the payroll money for this year, but the AAV is what counts toward the luxury tax. So you can't work around that at all. But they did restructure some to take down the cost of what they're paying those guys this year. Jonathan says, should the Braves trade for Reds Nick Lodolo? I think the Reds need all the pitching that they can get, so I don't know why they would trade him. Doc, yes, if you missed it yesterday, Bauer is out. He signed with the MPB team. He's also saying some crazy stuff on social media right now that is just, I don't think, true. But either way, Trevor Bauer is gone. So let that go, Doc. Justin Caraway, do you really think Acuna will be out for a month? He looked good to me. I could see him being out for the month. I don't know that he has to be. So and look, we're not going to know anything until we get to spring training, but just the way that I view this situation, as you said, he looks great. I think if they wanted Acuna ready for opening day, I think he and Strider both could be ready for opening day. From everything Alex has said, it sounds like both could be ready for opening day. They're just not going to rush it. And especially with Acuna on his second knee injury, they're just not going to rush it. So do I think he could play on opening day? Do I think he could be ready in the month of April? Yes. But it all comes down to how do the Braves want to approach it? And do they feel a need to rush him back? And, I don't think they will this time. And I think they will hold him out at least for the first couple of weeks of the season and just kind of evaluate it. And again, we'll see what happens in spring training. He comes in spring training. He's looking great. He's hitting bombs. Maybe it's only a week or two that they can actually, just not have this guy play that's ready to go. And he looks like one of the best players. But I think physically he looks fine. I think he's doing great in his rehab, and I think he could be ready to go on opening day. Look, last time the injury came later in the year and he was ready, was the end of April? I think that he was ready. So certainly just based on that timeline, he could be ready for opening day. I think the Braves just don't want to push it. And so I could see them holding him out for a month. I can't see them holding him out for more than that though. But just as far as how he looks and how the progress is going, everything that I am reading and seeing, it sounds like he's really good progress. And if the Braves really wanted to push it, he could be ready for opening day. There's just no reason to. All right. Thank you so much for joining me on today's podcast. Mass Booze, Michael Lawrence, Barry Snively, Benjamin Lee, Doc's Cards, Monty 2K. Appreciate you all joining. Justin Caraway, Jonathan, Bill Whittingham. Thank you all for joining on today's live episode of Locked On Braves. Sorry for my little coughing fit there at the beginning. Unfortunately, I'm recording live, so can't really edit that out. So that's quite embarrassing. But thanks for sticking with me anyway. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you're new. Hit that thumbs up button. Leave me a comment down below. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen. Follow us on social media at @ShortstopBall, at @LockedOn_Braves, and make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.